and welcome to Sleepy History Tales. Tonight, we descend into the darkest corners of the Middle Ages, into the dungeons where prisoners were locked away. At first glance, you may imagine a knightly tower, torches on the walls, and villains behind bars, but the truth was far more terrifying. Dungeons were cold, damp, filthy, and deadly. So tonight, let us step into the life of a medieval prisoner and discover why you would not survive even a single day in such a place. But the dungeon was not designed for comfort. Beneath castles or deep within stone towers, dungeons were damp caves carved into the rock. The air was heavy with mold and rot. The walls dripped with moisture, and rats skittered across the floor. There was no sunlight, only the flicker of a torch if one was left burning at all. For most, it was endless darkness. Imagine being dragged down a spiral staircase, the clang of iron echoing with every step. The door slams shut, and the only sound is the rattle of chains. Your bed is a patch of straw crawling with lice. Your blanket is a rag stiff with filth. You lie on stone so cold it seeps into your bones, and the smell of human waste hangs heavy in the air. There are no toilets, only buckets, rarely emptied. Disease spreads as quickly as whispers. Food was scarce and often rotten. A crust of stale bread, a bowl of thin gruel, or a cup of water drawn from a dirty well might be all you received in a day. Some prisoners were deliberately starved, their rations cut to weaken them before questioning. Hunger gnawed constantly, and thirst was worse. To drink from the slimy bucket meant sickness. To refuse meant death. And then, there were the rats. They thrived in the filth, crawling over prisoners as they slept, biting at wounds, gnawing on scraps. In some places, rats were a tool of torture, released into the cells deliberately. 4 prisoners chained to walls, unable to move, the creatures became nightly companions, bold enough to feast on the living. Torture was a common reality. Few were thrown into dungeons simply to wait. Many were brought there to be broken physically, mentally, spiritually. The rack stretched bodies until joints tore. The Iron Maiden pierced flesh with spikes. The Strapado wrenched shoulders from their sockets. Each method was designed not just to harm, but to destroy hope. And even for those spared such devices, the fear of torture was its own torment. Chains were constant. Heavy iron shackles bound wrists and ankles, rubbing skin raw. Some were fastened to walls, forced to sit in one position for days. Others were placed in stocks or cages, too small to stand, too cramped to sleep. The weight of the chains was a punishment in itself, dragging down every breath, every thought, every dream of escape. Disease thrived. Insects swarmed wounds. Dysentery spread through unclean water. Pneumonia claimed lungs in the damp cold. Prisoners coughed through the night, and each breath was a struggle. Few survived long enough to see release. For most, the dungeon was not a holding cell, it was a slow death sentence. Justice in the Middle Ages was brutal, and many prisoners never even knew their crimes. Some were accused falsely. Others were victims of politics, held until families paid ransoms. Trials, when they came, were swift and unfair. And punishment, execution, mutilation, exile, were often decided long before the prisoner ever left the dungeon. For nobles, conditions could sometimes be better. A knight captured in war might be held in a guarded room with a bed and food, awaiting ransom. But for peasants, thieves, or the unlucky, the dungeon was a pit with no mercy. The gulf between rich and poor extended even to suffering. And imagine the endless nights. No fire, no candle, no clock to mark the hours. Only darkness, pressing in like a second skin. Days and nights blended into one. You hear footsteps above, distant voices, the clink of keys, but no one calls your name. You are forgotten, a shadow beneath the world. Escape was nearly impossible. Walls of stone rose thick around you. Guards patrolled above, and even if you broke free, you faced forests, rivers, and strangers who might drag you back for reward. Few ever saw freedom again, and those who did often carried scars, broken bodies, shattered minds, haunted memories. The dungeon was more than punishment. It was a warning. Tales of its horrors spread through villages, a reminder of what awaited rebels, thieves, or heretics. Fear was as powerful as the bars of iron. To be sent to the dungeon was not just imprisonment, it was a living death, a mark of shame that lingered long after release. So tonight, as you lay safely in your bed, remember how fragile survival once was. In the Middle Ages, freedom could vanish with a single accusation. and once the dungeon doors closed behind you, there was little chance of escape. Be grateful for the warmth around you, the softness of your blanket, and the silence of your room, for truly, you would not last a single day in a medieval dungeon. Sleep well, and let the echoes of history fade into gentle dreams.